we've got our next gentleman on here. We have Pat McCutcheon. Please forgive me if I did not say that name correct. I got to see it.
How you doing, John?
I heard that you guys knew each other. I'm like, I'm going to take this over the side so it doesn't block this too much.
This is, small industry, of course. We've known each other for a long time.
Yeah, how's it going, buddy? Good, man. How you doing?
Good.
So we thought
busy. It's crazy right now.
It's nonstop. Well,
it's a big day for everybody.
Yeah.
Ever.
It's fantastic, and we've been talking about it all day. It's here. Yes. We're ready.
Finally.
What a statement for Canada, but for cannabis in general.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think this is a really exciting day. I think there's lots of bumps that the regulations that have gone through right now, and everyone's been so excited, and the buzz is here. It's finally here, and I think now it's time for Canada to show the rest of the world actually how to lead the path, just like you were mentioning, as I heard coming into the room. Really exciting. This is great.
And speaking of statements, actually, MediPharm, for those who don't know who just stepped in here, you guys, correct me if I'm wrong, were the very first license to have your oils license without being a specifically like a cultivator LP.
Exactly. So we were the first licensed producer to award a license without cultivation first. And so what we do is we just look at two different kind of forms of working with our different clients and customers. One being where we buy wholesale, we process, and we sell wholesale back to other cultivation partners or into different provincial distribution paths. Or we actually take product where we don't actually take ownership of the product. We process it. We charge a per gram processing rate depending on what type of purity we go to, or what type of packaging or product we form it into. And then we send it back to that cultivator for distribution to their medical patients or to different provincial distributions.
Very interesting. And that's going to be a big market.
It's going to be, we see looking at it as a huge market. And one of the things that I think we're a bunch of pharmaceutical guys that have literally been pulled from different areas of generic pharma, brand pharma, and biopharmaceutical manufacturing. And our key to success, I think, so far is putting those scientists together and PhDs to look at true GMP product development and manufacturing, whether or not it's going to be for medical patient or client or a recreational user. We feel that it has to be top quality, and that top quality is very important for safety and for the regulatory perspective.
So I'm going to throw a curveball here and ask just a quick question based off that. Having all the scientists in here, we were speaking earlier about cannabis. A lot of people are saying that cannabis will take away from alcohol sales, and I think that to an extent that is true. I mean, it's kind of like if I said earlier, if you're going out for dinner or you're going out for food, you're hungry. So McDonald's and the keg, they still compete with each other, but they're not directly in competition because they're very different. So cannabis and alcohol are similar but different. One of the biggest things is that if you're going to go out to have a beer, you can have a beer. Like if you're having dinner and you have a beer, you're fine. If you go out to dinner and you toke a nice, strong indica, like there's a little bit of a difference. When it comes to the oils, though, do you think we're going to get to a point where we have something where you can put it into a drink, or just something where, if you have one, you're comfortable. It's a little bit of a buzz, and you can expect it each time, like maybe 2% THC. Who knows? Do you think that's on its way?
I think it's on its way. I think the regulatory's got a ways to go before it actually supports this, and we find a way to work it safely. I think there's obviously different dosages forms are kind of, they're available now, but you have to be very careful in terms of an individual user and how much you take, and then what that kind of safety line is. When you look at drinking a handful of beers and hanging out in a group of guys, it's one thing to watch sports, but if you, let's say for kind of lack of a better description or example, if you have a drink with a 10 milligram dose, which is typically would be considered a dose, if you take one of those, and maybe if I take one of those, I'm just at the point where I'm having a good time, and then maybe Mike takes two of those, and then he's all of a sudden way over the line, and you just have that small kind of, it's just two drinks would actually create a situation where you're over the line and it's not comfortable anymore. I think there's got to be a lot more kind of education in terms of dosing and how this is going to play out, because that's dangerous. Typically a group of guys at a Sunday watching football will have 5, 6, 7 beers maybe, and that's not really the case in terms of how we're looking at dosing. If maybe there's an opportunity for drinks to have 2 to 3 milligrams in them, but even still, if you look at the bioavailability and how quickly you'll actually react to however that powder or that liquid, whether or not it's fat soluble or water soluble, is added to that drink is really unique and individualized to the user. So there's a lot of learning to do there. We're going to be in the forefront of helping out with education in terms terms of how you can look at dosing. We're working with a lot of different physician groups to help out with kind of analyzing through research and development specifics with unique cannabinoids, and to see what the reaction is of those cannabinoids by themselves. So then you can actually look at what it would be like to do them individually and then full spectrum. So there's a very, very big element there that we have to do a lot more research and development on.
Yeah, and that's one of the a lot of people always, this big thing before we actually legalized was, oh, when's the last time you heard someone overdose off cannabis?
Yeah.
And you know, if you're smoking cannabis, I've seen people green out and whatever, but that happens at times, but
especially when they're drinking.
And you're overdoing it. Yeah. When it comes to oils, people really do need to be mindful that oils is a whole different game. I mean, alcohol you can drink responsibly, but if you chug a 2.6, like you're going to have issues. I think when it comes to oils, like you got to be careful. 100%. You have to be mindful with your dosing.
I think that's, you know, it's exciting today because we have full adult use legalization. So like your example before of an indica strain, I think going forward you're going to have now people consuming products, but they're actually going to have somewhat more repeatable experiences than they had in the past. So you see online there's pre-rolled joints now and oil tinctures, and even with dried bud, it's not like this is something that you have no idea what it is if it's the same thing as 6 times ago or 10 times. People are going to start getting into brand preferences and knowing what they're buying every time. Yeah. Where it really gets to start interesting with a group like MediPharm is when you start having products that are in a delivery method that's a lot more both, you know, able to control that dose, but also from a consumer-facing perspective, appealing to different types of consumers. So yeah, something like a beverage where it exists. We actually spoke about this a bunch last time I was on. Yeah. It exists in the U.S. It's actually quite a small market, but Canada, with you know the scale that we have, the level of production scale that has been done for cultivation and now oils and pills and capsules. Once we get into beverages and we start doing them dosed correctly, you know, with proper responding to pressure and temperature well, mixing well, tasting proper, the onset in the right amount of time, the offset, and actually like the education piece where someone knows, you and I know what a 10 milligram dose is or a 7 milligram dose is.
Exactly.
But we need to get to that point where an everyday consumer knows this is something, whether it's 3 or 5 or 7 or 9, and even given the variability between people, that this is something that works for them and is safe to try once or twice. And then eventually people will get into products that I think they'll be able to comfortably consume over and over again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I love the point that you said that people will come back for certain products, because right now, before this, unless you had your medical license, something like that, you could go grab cannabis off whoever you're grabbing. They might be the best person that you ever met, but regardless, they're gray market and it's legal. But each time they might look at you and go, this is sour diesel. And
last time I had sour diesel, it did this to me. Well, what is this sour diesel? You don't know. Where is it grown? How is it?
When you're going with these LPs, I don't know if viewers understand how stringent.
Yeah.
Like, of all the things, I've always, sometimes when the governments have certain regulations, I laugh and I call you screwed this up. One thing the government did very well with Health Canada was the actual process of knowing what's going on. Yeah. The delays and all that, that's another thing, that's human error, we're learning. But the actual process of becoming an LP, you're not going to get that unless you really know what you're doing.
And then something that Pat could probably touch on way more than me, but also when you have like a strain, different grows, depending on exactly the growing condition, it's never really exactly the same. The genetics change over time, the people in there change over time. Even with an automated grow, there's different factors. When you're dealing with finished products like a beverage or a vape pen, it's really being broken down into its constituent parts, and the consistency level with the same product is going to get a lot more significant.
Yeah, good point, actually.
We feel very strongly. So it's one thing in terms of understanding what you can handle yourself. That's so internalizing and understanding what you can deal with in terms of what dose you can. It's another whole thing to have a product that's available on the shelf consistently that's going to have a very tight kind of variability or lack of variability. And so what we've seen now in the kind of evolution of the industry itself, and definitely through the kind of the gray market or black market, is that you can look at, let's say, a tincture bottle that's sour diesel, and there can be, let's say, 2 or 3 tincture bottles on the shelf, but within that, even within that batch, there can be, let's say, plus or minus 10 to 15% variability in the amount of active component or cannabinoids in that bottle.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we really try to pride ourselves on is when you go to GMP or like pharmaceutical production, that's GMP is the word typically I think for like the cannabis person coming new. GMP means pharmaceutical production. When you look at that, you to create a system where you take the variability away. And so when you order a tincture bottle in early December, and then when you order one late February, you're gonna get the exact same thing. And so you can also use that to rely on the same dose. And that's how the evolution of the industry, I think, is coming to a better spot. And Health Canada has done a great job of creating the regulatory environment to support this. Yeah. And I think, again, it goes back to just the quality in manufacturing. That's a requirement, and the world's watching us to hit those kind of thresholds for quality. So we have to be the leaders there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
helps to have the significant pharma background.
Yeah, definitely. That's why Johnson & Johnson has given me kind of a good perspective and background on that piece.
Yeah. Well, because it's interesting, because even though we're talking about beverages and like buying an actual beverage, I think a lot more people are going to have drops that they can put in, 2 drops into their coffee, 2 drops, whatever, and stir it up. So that there's not as much time for it to interact to change, because you're not going to have a coffee and leave it there for 3 weeks and come back and drink it.
Right.
I hope you're not doing that. Coffee's not that expensive. Don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe on a Sunday morning, but other than that.
But to be able to put those drops and have consistency, that's what these medical patients. I was talking to my own doctor actually, and I said, "Are you ever going to prescribe cannabis?" And he's like, "It's hard when each time I don't know really what I'm prescribing."
Right.
But I've spoken to some people now when they start going to distillates and where you're able to extract like specific cannabinoids, or just you have a much
isolates.
You have a much better process. He's like, with that, if I can get more evidence that it works, I'll begin prescribing it as an option if they ask for me. So if they want that.
So not to put you on the spot, but so obviously the last few days there's been so many headlines and news stories and press releases, but one that I think probably caught a few people's attention was, I believe it was on the 16th that Aurora got the first license to actually do CBD vape pens.
Right.
Obviously, just a huge consumer product in a lot of mature states, something that people talk a lot about. Obviously, we know over the next year we're going to have certain products introduced. How do you view that news in the context of what's going on?
I think it's great that Aurora's actually kind of broken ground there and gotten the regulatory support behind it. There's a kind of uniqueness in terms of how you actually have to fill your vape pen. That's just a kind of a middle stepping stone for the regulatory to catch up before we can get to a system where there's just a full vape pen where you can just connect a battery and move to. So there's a little bit of evolution that we need to get down that path. However, I think vape pens are one of the biggest future products that can actually support medical and recreational user, as well as the kind of the wellness user that looks to rely on a lower dose to not get super high.
So what they came out with is like just because I read the press release and didn't fully understand. So you can put it into a 510 cart, but it's not prepackaged in that 510 cart.
Yes, yeah, they can't prepackage together.
Okay, is that like almost like a loophole they were able to find? Not loophole, but like that's just.
Aurora's been really smart in doing that and how they've kind of positioned themselves within the regulatory framework. I think we're really keeping a sharp eye on this to look at this moving forward, because I think vape pens are such an important piece of what's going to move, and it's also a piece that's being absolutely nailed down in the black market we need to get rid of. So I think that's a big piece for Health Canada to look at and for different regulator perspectives. So there's a little bit of movement there, but the vape pen gives an opportunity to dose reliance. And that's beautiful for physicians, because physicians don't feel comfortable giving their patient an option where they can control their own dosing regimen. That's the most dangerous situation. Not to mention when you get a child or something grabbing it. And it's obviously less danger to your lungs.
And I actually see more and more people, whether it's CBD and it just calms them, relaxes them, or whether it's THC. A lot of people recently have been using vape pens, and because it's in your pocket, you can pull it out. You could have 1 or 2, whatever it be, but you don't reek of smoke afterwards. You didn't have to light a huge joint or anything. It's just there, done.
Yeah.
You don't have to light a pipe and then put it out and wash it so no one smells it. Put it back in your pocket.
Exactly.
So I actually am very surprised. I always laugh. Of all the methods, we went, you know what? Cannabis is bad. We're not doing edibles that you can eat. We're not doing vaporizers that don't have smoke.
Not yet.
We're going to go and we're going to do flower that you're going to, that's a carcinogen that you're going to smoke, because that's the safest way to start. I laugh at it sometimes, but
and if you
got to start somewhere.
If you look at the different global jurisdictions that have taken the steps forward, like that's one thing that's Colombia's really surprised me, where they've actually allowed only a liquid-based medical environment.
Is that what?
And that's cutting edge compared to a flower-based medical environment, which again, there's a lot of things that we can kind of enhance upon. I think we're going very much in the right direction, but that's one of the biggest things. I think vaping is much safer and dose reliant, as well as you don't have that kind of stigma of smoking a joint if you don't want that. Right? So
and UK, specific. I think UK just came out. I think that's their stipulation too. It has to be liquid. They'll do it, but they won't do it so that you can smoke it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, just because Canada was such a first mover in this, we don't get the benefit of the rearview mirror as these new countries coming on. So it's our program started really in the courts with reversals of decisions where flour was the product being used, and that was sort of, at that time, oil-based products were starting to spurt up in the United States, but they really didn't have the popularity that they do today. So because the government committed to get it done by today or this general time frame quite a few years ago, they're saying let's get this introduced, and then obviously things like vape pens, edibles, drinks, patches, cream, sublinguals, they seem a lot less harmful on their face. At the same time, something like edibles, you need to get right because there's a lot you can do wrong with edibles.
Ask Colorado and Washington how that happened.
So I think they have the right approach. It's just like you were just saying, and you're also saying from the black market, those are products that still exist. From a health and wellness perspective, those products should probably exist before the whole country is starting to develop, start smoking again. So I think there's definitely a movement on that, which is why the Aurora release was interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how quickly some of them come on.
And just the perception in the general public. I literally was in a cab last night, and a kind of a middle-aged guy who seemed like he would kind of be educated on the industry itself. Middle-aged guy. I don't know. He had a lot more hair than I did, so I'm not sure how middle-aged like I am. But he felt that the dispensaries were a legal faction and an opportunity to actually get legal product. And so there's a lot of education that needs to come with this, and that's where the next major steps need to come.
It's going to take time
and focus. Absolutely,
it's such a huge change, but it's interesting, and companies like yourselves are very, very interesting, because I've always said, look for companies that are going into oils. You guys are almost, or you are
We're exclusive,
strictly oils.
MediPharm Labs never invest in cultivation directly. We work with a number of different cultivators, and the way we look at it is de-risking the business model. There's a number of companies that have challenges with indoor cultivation, right? And Canada is a really difficult place to grow indoors with a very limited number of pesticides. So we try to look at just from the business perspective to work with a number of different groups that will hopefully, a handful of them will pop off for large volume production, and that de-risks the business model. So we only exclusively focus on extraction.
It's an exciting story with you guys. Like I have a lot of friends who have been early supporters of you guys. Obviously, been public now for a few weeks.
For 3 days. I think we're 9 days.
It's an exciting story. No, it feels like it's been a few weeks.
With the weekend, it feels like it was a huge milestone for us to get over. But yes, I keep going where you're going on this line.
No, I'm just sort of like, it's a whole sort of new world, because now it's not just the stocks trading and all that, but there's a lot more attention. New people are going to be coming into where you guys are competing. People who are playing on the cultivation space are looking to sort of expand, and you guys really look like forward thinkers. So how's that whole process been and everything?
How the process has been challenging. I think one of the things with Health Canada was that originally it just didn't fit into the kind of the protocol of the application process. And so we went through certain times over like about 2.5-year process where Health Canada was questioning how is your business model sustainable, and with being extraction only and being independent like that, can you prove to us to show that you actually have a sustainable business model? And so some of the friends that we're actually discussing here that were kind of early supporters of the company that were from other LPs, we were actually able to get LOIs suggesting that they would send product to us to get us out of the gates. We submitted a package of 5 LOIs to Health Canada to say this is a sustainable business model. It's a unique one, yes, but this is needed in the industry because cultivation is so difficult, and typically extraction is looked at as an afterthought. That it's truly 2 different industries in itself. And so we really tried to position, looking at California and Colorado, where there was a number of examples where you have processing or tolling houses, as well as extraction only kind of business strategies, and they were synergistic with large cultivation. So we think that it's difficult to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. That cliche statement, I think, is very applicable to this industry. And so we try to make our cultivation partners better by by not only working with them from the minute they harvest the plant through drying and curing to how it gets to our facility, but we give them the advantage to use that more space to accelerate their business model, to hit those kind of volumes they're looking for cultivation, and also to accelerate their opportunity to get oil SKUs on the shelf. So it was a really needed piece, and we feel like we're connectors in the industry.
Well, it's exciting. Well, we're going to jump to a clip because we were actually talking to different Canadians. We went downstairs right down here and just started asking people. But you're on the stock exchange. Is it CSC?
Yeah, we're at the TSXV, and we're listed under the ticker symbol LABS, LABS.